Hi there. Have you ever tried trying to convince highly positioned people, like board members or top managers or something like that, on an idea that you might have concerning digital issues? Well, if you have, I guess you've noticed it's pretty difficult sometimes. I mean, it's far easier to convince people if you, for instance, are higher on the hierarchical ladder, but if you're not, you gotta be careful. Here's an idea on how to at least get a little bit further than you've done so far. And it came to my mind as an experience I had something like, I think it was nearly 20 years ago. I was invited to a listed, pretty well known company, to the top managers within the financial part of the company. And I was asked to talk about finance, changes of annual reporting and all that. And by coincidence, there was another person also invited for that conference. And it was a rather young person who actually was one of the founders of one of the really well-known ICT internet-based companies in my country at that point in time. And I mean, that person was like 20 years younger than me. And well, I'm not sure, but it seemed to me that that person was definitely not prepared for that kind of meeting, because I don't think he actually knew what kind of company he was talking to. But anyhow, he stepped into the room and gave his presentation and says something like, "Hey, the internet is coming, and just so you know, if you don't prepare, you're gonna die." And I was sitting there and thinking for myself, wow, that was a little bit too radical. Anyhow, everyone there listened quietly, and that's it. And then he left. And then it was my turn to give the presentation about financial issues. And just so you know, I got a PhD in the field of management. I've prepared quite well, I think. And then I started my presentation. But it took less than 3 minutes before somebody interrupted me, and then the whole discussion was ongoing. They thought actually I was wrong. Well, to be honest, I still think I was right, but they thought I was wrong, and they gave me a lot of arguments for why I was wrong. So what could I do? I did what I did. And then I went to bed. Well, the thing is, I was actually asked to be there the next day too. When we had breakfast, I noticed something, that everyone, literally nearly everyone within that top management group was talking about their private life, and not the least concerning their old children and what they were up to. And all their children had bought a PC and had started to talk about something called the internet. And what I noticed was actually it seemed like all the managers was actually convinced that the guy who did the presentation the day before me, he was actually right. They were convinced. They agreed that if they didn't shape up, the internet would kill their business. But in my case, they were convinced I was wrong. So I went home, and then I started thinking, how come all that things happened? And then it came to my mind that the ones that actually participated was the children. And the ones that convinced all these managers was actually their own personal experience. And ever since then, I've been thinking about highly positioned people. They're also individuals, They also have a private life. And ever since then, I've been thinking of what kind of private life do they have? We just assume when we talk to a group of people that everyone is in the same position. But they're not. Everyone is mentally at different places, not the least related to their personal life. So then it came to my mind that if I want to talk about digital issues, which I've actually been doing for like 10 years now, perhaps I could use that. And by that, I've started to do it in this way instead. I pretty often ask the people who's participating, what kind of apps do they use? And sometimes they give the same answer, sometimes it give the different answer. And then they suddenly start talking. How come you use Spotify? How come you use Reddit? How come you use whatever, whatever? And after having that done, I can calibrate a little bit and know where the participants actually is mentally when it comes to digital issues. And if everyone's coming, reading the news via an app, I use that as a starting point for discussion on what can we actually do with digital issues. And it seems to be working pretty well. Well, you might feel that this is just fooling around and making fun and being a fool. And yes, in some sense you're right. But then I guess perhaps you forget one thing. Why did the king have a fool at the king's court? Historically, during the Middle Ages, there was a fool at king's court, right? Yeah, that fool was there for a reason, to make fun and make everyone smile. But there was another reason too. The king had a fool at the court because the fool was one of the few that actually could speak the real truth to the king without getting the head chopped off, so to speak. So I think giving a smile and letting people smile on it, a difficult, complicated matter like digital changes and disruption of industry, which is a pretty radical message, I would say. Wouldn't it be okay if they smile a little bit on it? Just so you know, the best way to show your teeth, isn't that actually to smile?